The order came before the army did. Israel had been moving away from Egypt. Then the instruction changed. Turn back and camp by the sea, in front of a place called Pi-hahiroth, with a site called Migdol on one side and the water at their backs. It put an entire population, families, herds, everything a people carries when it leaves a country, in a position with no exit anyone in that camp could see. Exodus says the position was meant to be read that way. Pharaoh would hear where they were and conclude that the wilderness had closed around them. He did, and he came with chariots. What follows is one night. The chapter marks its stages. The force arriving, a barrier at Israel's back, a wind blowing until dawn, a crossing, a pursuit into the water, and the last watch before the light. By the time the morning appeared, the force that had gone into the sea after Israel was gone. This is that night, in the order Exodus gives it, with the line kept visible between what the text says and what we are only reconstructing. Start with where they were, because the chapter is specific about it and useless for a map. Exodus gives 3 names: Pi-hahiroth, which the camp faces; Migdol on one side, a site whose name is associated with a tower or a fortification; Baal-zephon, opposite; and then the water, which the chapter almost always calls simply the sea. None of the 3 can be fixed to a modern point with agreement behind it, and the ground itself has moved. The eastern delta of the late Bronze Age had channels, lakes, and shorelines that no longer exist, so the route cannot be traced across a satellite image of Egypt today. What the chapter hands us instead is a set of relations. Water on one side, a place named for a tower or fortification on another, a landmark opposite, a large, slow population in between, and behind them a road, wide enough for chariots. Pharaoh's line about the wilderness closing in is a commander's assessment of that position, not a survey of the terrain. There are no cliffs in this chapter, no canyon, no walls of rock funneling the camp toward the water. What made the position fatal in his reading was the combination: the sea in front of them, and his chariots able to reach them from behind. That is the shape of the trap. Everything the night does depends on it. Pharaoh changes his mind and mobilizes. Exodus gives one number for the pursuit: 600 chosen chariots. Then it adds the rest of the chariots of Egypt and stops counting. 600 is a detachment, not a total, and the chapter never tells us how many men, horses, or vehicles were on that road. Any figure for the full force is being built somewhere outside the text. The measurement that matters is inside the vehicle itself. An Egyptian chariot of this period was light: 2 wheels, a wooden frame, leather, a central pole, a pair of horses. A preserved example connected to a royal burial, reconstructed in model form by the Metropolitan Museum, runs a little over 2.5 meters, and the museum's own note is that the original was light and probably not built for combat. That is the parallel available to us: a frame made to be pulled fast across open ground, carrying 1 or 2 men, which is what makes this situation what it is. Whatever Exodus 13:18 means by the manner of their departure, chapter 14 shows no Israelite battle formation and no counterattack, and no Egyptian charge, no arrows, no weapon used at all that night. It doesn't need to. A chariot force on flat ground against families walking with animals and possessions is not a battle. It is an overtaking, and that is the verb Exodus uses. The Egyptians overtook them, camped by the sea. Then Israel looks up. The text keeps the reaction collective, and it is worth keeping it there. Great fear, a cry to the Lord, and an accusation thrown at Moses. Were there no graves in Egypt, they ask, that you brought us out here to die? Better to have served Egypt than to die in the wilderness. The individual faces and voices in that camp are ours to imagine. The panic and the words are the chapters. Moses answers with 4 instructions and 1 claim. Do not be afraid. Stand still. Watch what the Lord will do. Be quiet. And the claim underneath them, the Lord will fight for you. Hold that line. It comes back before morning, and not from Moses. Then the chapter does something easy to miss. God's reply to Moses is not a promise of protection where they stand. It is a redirect. Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to go forward. Lift your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea. The instruction is to walk toward the water, the barrier itself, while the chariots close from behind. The first thing that moves that night is not the sea. The angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel, goes to the rear. The pillar of cloud moves with it, from the head of the column to the back, and takes up a position between the 2 camps. The result is the part everyone agrees on. Through the whole night, the camps do not come near each other. A force that had already caught up did not close the last of the distance, and the advantage a chariot force holds, ground it can cross at speed, a target it can reach, was out of reach until morning. How that worked is harder. Exodus 14:20 is the most difficult verse in the chapter. The Hebrew names cloud and darkness, then a form many translators read as lighting up the night, which is where the familiar image comes from. Dark on the Egyptian side, light on Israel's. The ancient Greek reads it without that light at all. So the separation is solid and the optics are open. A screen with 1 black face and 1 burning face is a painting we inherited. What Israel had that night was time. Whatever stood behind them held, and the chapter spends the hours. Moses stretches out his hand over the sea, and the chapter names the means without hesitating about the agent. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all that night, and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. One textual note, because it surfaces in translations. The Hebrew has an east wind. The Old Greek has a strong south wind. Strength and duration are in both. The compass point is not. Now, what that verse does not give: no wind speed, no width for the passage, no length, no depth on either side, no height for the water, no account of what it looked like from inside. The chapter says the waters were a wall on their right and on their left, and it says the ground was dry, and that is the entire visual specification. Sheer transparent faces standing hundreds of meters over the crowd. That is cinema working with a metaphor. There is real science in the neighborhood, and it belongs in its own place. Strong, sustained wind across shallow water can push water off a bottom and hold it off. The effect is documented, and a peer-reviewed study in 2010 modeled it over a reconstructed Eastern Delta geometry, producing a temporarily dry passage under a specific set of conditions. In one configuration, shifting the modeled wind by about 30 degrees closed the passage again. That work shows what wind can do to shallow water. It does not identify a site, date an event, or measure anything about this night. So when a wind speed or a corridor width turns up attached to Exodus 14, those are the inputs and outputs of a simulation, moved into a chapter that never gave a number. And the chapter never treats the wind as a rival explanation. It is the instrument named inside the act. Israel goes in. This is not a column of soldiers crossing a bridge. The people who left Egypt traveled with children, with the old, with livestock, and with whatever they had carried out. And how large that group was is one of the long arguments, since the received text counts 600,000 men on foot besides dependents, and the Hebrew word behind 1,000 can also carry the sense of a clan or a unit. The argument has no winner, and it does not touch the shape of the movement. Many people, moving slowly in the dark, with animals and loads, in the noise of a wind that has been blowing for hours, into a passage with water standing on both sides of them. Those two things the chapter states plainly. The ground was dry. It says so 3 separate times, in the command, in the crossing, and in the summary. And the water was a wall on their right and on their left. The height and the surface of it are ours. So is the choreography we inherited from paintings, with the tribes in ordered files and Moses fixed at the center, staff held over the crowd. Exodus has him raise his hand twice, once to open the way, once to close it. And the pursuit follows them in. Horses, chariots, and riders into the middle of the sea. The chapter never says Pharaoh went in himself. Now the chapter gives its sharpest time marker, and it is not a clock. In the morning watch, the last watch of the night, the stretch of dark immediately before dawn, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian force from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw it into confusion. You will often see that phrase converted into 3 in the morning until 6. Exodus does not say that. The length of a night moves with the season. The number and boundaries of the watches depend on which system you assume, and the chapter supplies neither. What the phrase does fix is position. The far end of the night, with the light close. Then the machinery fails. The Hebrew can be read as the chariot wheels being removed or turned aside. Other ancient witnesses have the wheels or the axles binding, so that the chariots were driven with difficulty. The outcome is stable across the versions. The fastest thing in Egypt stops working properly, and the exact failure is not. Mud is not named in the account. It is a reconstruction, not a textual detail. And then the Egyptians say it out loud. Let us flee from Israel. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. That is Moses' sentence. Hours earlier, he had set it to a terrified camp on the shore. The Lord will fight for you. Now it comes back from inside the sea in the same verb, from the men who came to take them home. The chapter does not give its verdict to Moses, or to Israel, or to the narrator. It puts it in the mouth of the pursuing force, in the dark, at the moment they understand what they are inside of. Moses stretches out his hand a second time. Toward morning, the sea comes back to its normal state. The Egyptians are running into it as it returns. The water covers the chariots and the horsemen, the whole force of Pharaoh that had gone into the sea after Israel. And Exodus says that not one of them remained. That sentence needs its edges kept. The word them has an antecedent 3 verses back. The force that entered the water in pursuit. It is a total statement about that force. It is not a claim that Egypt no longer had an army, or that no Egyptian soldier survived anywhere. And reading it that way asks the verse to say something it never attempts. The same care applies to the king. Exodus 14 does not narrate Pharaoh entering the water and does not narrate his death. The song in the next chapter says his chariots and his army were cast into the sea. It doesn't report the man. Every telling that ends with a crowned body in the surf is filling a blank the chapter left open. And the blank goes further than that. Exodus never names this Pharaoh, and the date of these events is one of the longest-running arguments in the field. Keep those limits, and the sequence holds. By morning, the force that had gone in after Israel was gone. Israel is on the far side. The chapter repeats the detail it has repeated all night. They walked through on dry ground, and then gives the image that ends the sequence. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore. This is usually the point where someone asks what has been recovered from the sea. The answer is nothing that has been verified. No excavation report, documented location, chain of custody, dating, publication, independent review, exists for chariot wheels, for human or animal remains, or for weapons connected to this event, and the best-known claim, coral-shaped wheels photographed in the Gulf of Aqaba, has circulated for decades without any of it. And nothing found is not the same as nothing happened. No site is agreed, the coastline has moved, organic components would be difficult to preserve and identify in that environment, and no known Egyptian inscription has been securely connected with the event. The position is narrow, and it is the correct one. There is no direct archaeological confirmation available. Exodus 14 never offered wreckage as its argument. Go back to the order that started the night. Turn back. Camp by the sea. Let Pharaoh hear where you are. By the chapter's own account, the position that looked like the end of the journey was the place chosen for the thing it wanted Israel to see. And the last verse says, what seeing it did to them. Israel saw the great work the Lord had done against Egypt. The people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. That is the ending, and it is not a location. Exodus 14 will not give us the coastline, the hour, the width of the passage, or the name of the king. It gives a sequence and one line that travels the whole night, spoken by Moses to a camp that could not see a way out, and repeated hours later, in the dark, by the men who came to take them back. The song that opens the next chapter adds nothing about where it happened. It only names who did it.